The Great Depression of 1990. Did it really happen? To study, I have this book. And as a result, I have an advantage over people who have not had the opportunity to read it. It was written in the latter part of the 1980s. Was there really a depression in 1990? Well, I'm going to give you my view on it and a little bit of history of some of the things that have happened to me. The feeling that we had out in the shop that there would be maybe 10 or 20 guys out in the shop working to support some guy who sat in the office shuffling papers all day long. And I can remember those days and how we resented that. And I look at today and see how that has changed. Now you've got 40 or 50 people sitting in the office shuffling papers and 2 guys working out in the shop. Such a system just simply doesn't work. Of course, we all know about that period in time when imports coming from foreign countries were selling for less. Cars, airplanes, all kinds of things were selling for less than we could compete with. And we started to lose more and more of the market share on these things. And governments and banks tried desperately to find some way to solve this. At that point in my life, I was probably making about $10 an hour. And $10 an hour would buy you a house in the range of $30,000 in the early part of the 1970s. The same house today probably would be about $250,000, and you'd have to be making $75, $80, maybe $90 an hour to be able to afford such a house today. And Jimmy Carter was investing a lot of money in alternative energy things. Because of the Arab oil embargo from the 1970s, early part, he realized we've got a problem that we need to do something about. So he started putting money into electric cars, windmills, research into all kinds of solar panels and all of that stuff. And when Ronald Reagan was elected to president, that is the very first thing he did was cancel all of those alternative energy programs. The second thing that Ronald Reagan did was to declare the American working people as an enemy. Somehow, they got the idea that the way to compete against these foreign countries was to lower the cost of wages to a point where it was under what Asians were making. Well, how do you do this? How do you go to a guy that's working out in the shop as a welder or a machinist or a first-class sheet metal fabricator, and you're telling him, sir, you've been making $10 an hour. We want you to now start to work for $1 an hour. Well, of course they wouldn't do that. They would go out on strike. And to the Reagan administration, they saw that as being something as an enemy that they have to deal with. So they came up with this brilliant scheme. Let's just simply devalue the dollar so that $10 an hour that the machinist was making is now only worth $1 an hour. Simply devalue it. A very clever scheme, and it worked. People had no clue what took place. I know about this because my father retired at that time. And when he retired, he thought he was going to have money to travel around the world. And unfortunately, when he retired, he found out his money was only worth 1/10 of what he thought it was going to be worth. And he couldn't go back to work, so he was stuck with it. And I can remember now that he complained about that all the time. But this is what the Reagan administration did. It fooled the whole working class of America. This concept of take money from working people and give it to the wealthy. What a concept. You wouldn't think anybody would buy something like that. It's essentially, to someone because I've built houses, it's like we're going to build a house and we're going to start with the roof. Now, to somebody like me, that would sound totally ridiculous. Of course, you start with the foundation, the bottom, and you build up. You don't start with the roof and build down. That's illogical. But somehow the Reagan administration was able to sell that to the American people. Well, the next thing to follow is not hard to figure, that since you've devalued the dollar, now anyone who's selling a car or selling a home, they have to increase the price because the money's not worth anything anymore. So we go into this period of massive inflation. And it was through the Reagan years that we had what I refer to as a recession, with all of this inflation starting to climb. But then it changed in 1990. Things just got much worse. And that's why this particular book I agree with, because it was in fact 1990 when things really completely fell apart, in my opinion. Since that time, what they've done, they simply go into the back room and print more money. They take this money by the truckloads and they give it to their friends on Wall Street. And Wall Street is nothing more than a gambling casino for wealthy people. These are the people that Christ was tipping tables over back in his time. The money changers, people who make money by finagling and playing tricks with money. So they print the money, they give it to their friends, they go down to Wall Street and they buy stocks. The stock market goes up. They stand in front of the bell as they're ringing it at the end of the day, clapping their hands. And everybody acts like, well, this is an indication of how our economy is doing. Well, it certainly isn't. You see how the economy is doing if you go out on the Main Street anywhere in America and take a walk and look and see how people are doing. That shows you where we are, if we're in a depression or a recession or what. We've been in a depression since 1990, and it has been falsely misleading because they've got everybody thinking, well, as long as the Dow Jones is up, we must be doing fine. But the only reason the Dow Jones is up is fake and false printed money. There's nothing else holding it up. So now what do we do? Do you take wages from where they are right now at $5 or $10 or even $15 an hour and now run wages up to, say, $100, $150 an hour? That's not going to work, because then everybody who's selling things will just raise their price. There is only one solution to it. Well, there's two solutions. One solution is you have to bring prices back down. So these $250,000 houses are now going to be back down to $30,000, where somebody at today's wages can afford them again. Another thing that we can do as a nation is go out and conquer other nations, rob, steal, and plunder the things that they've got to bring them here so that we can have our high standard of living. In 1981, I was working for Cessna Aircraft in Wichita, Kansas. And massive layoffs were taking place at that time. That was the recessionary period. And I went out the door with 16,000 other people, and they continued laying off for several months after I went out the door. So I went out job hunting and looked all over the place. And one of the interviews I had was with Mitsubishi Aircraft down in San Angelo, Texas. And I met a guy down there and talked to him. I said, why is it that Japan is doing so much better in manufacturing and taking so much of this market share? What are they doing that we're missing? And he paused for a minute and he looked at me. He says, well, from his perspective, he told me, he says, the major difference is not in the working people, it is in management. And he told me, he says, in the morning, our managers come in for work. And he said, your managers are out on the golf course. And he says, it's easy to beat the American market.